Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Friday Masterclass, where today we're going to be talking about voice and vocal effects processing. I always solicit topic ideas from YouTube, from the Twitters, from Behance, and last week alone, I just had several people inquire on all of the aforementioned. How do I do that sort of echoey effect? Or I had someone in radio who was saying, yeah, I just started to do sort of imaging demos. They're out of radio, and I want to do this kind of stereo effects. How do I do that? How do I make that sound? Or, what's the difference between reverb and delay and echo? Or what's the difference between a plate reverb or a hall reverb? Or what does a flange sound like versus a phase? So we're going to cover those things today with a couple of cool examples. As always, we're coming to you live across multiple networks, so thank you so much for joining. If you want to be part of the live chat, this is the one that I'm following directly, b.net/Adobe Live. So if you've got any questions or just want to say hello or ask things along the way, that's the one that I'm following directly in front of my face. So I hope you'll ask some things. A couple of quick shouts. I see we've got Erland. And Karen is here. Hello, Karen. It's so great to see you. Faux My Life. Reverb Mike. Michael. Z by HP. Steve. Theo. Paloma. Tim, great to see you. Divom, nice to see you. Mateo and Muhammad Bashara. Good evening. Hello from Mexico. Subadeep, hi. Great to see everybody. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Oh, and also, before I forget, I wanted to mention now two things. One, someone was commenting last week, where's my camera, on the stream that, I was showing some 5 tips for better video, and one of them was around color correction and balancing, and we were talking about like skin tone balancing, and someone in the chat commented that my skin tone looked like I was, foreshadowing the zombie apocalypse look or something. That's not verbatim what they said, but it was something like that. So I went back and I was like, oh, I'm looking a little washed out. I mean, it's the winter time and I'm in the desert, so I'm not getting my normal dose of sun here. But in any case, I've warmed up some of the face lights. So if you're seeing, I have a nice little sort of warm glow. Whomever you were who said that last week, you were right. Also, you may recall during the stream last week, I went to go access the remix feature in Premiere Pro, and was momentarily perplexed when I couldn't find it. And that's because, it's still in the Premiere Pro beta, which I've shown many times. So if you want to access Remix today, you can still access it via the Premiere Pro beta. It will be coming to the Premiere Pro release version, hopefully very, very soon. If you haven't checked it out, it's great. You can check out previous videos where I show you how to use it. Also, one last thing, been talking about that we're going to have some different types of masterclasses coming in the next couple of weeks, months ahead. And specifically, these are going to be around sort of me collaborating with other people internally and maybe some external partners and things to showcase to you other workflows and just other methods of doing things in video, audio, and animation. So that'll be starting, I think, in approximately 2 weeks. We just kind of worked out the lineup yesterday of guests and topics and partners. It's going to be really cool. And you're just going to get to see a different side of kind of the Adobe implementation of some of our things from just other voices, other faces. Love that. Love bringing new people on, showcasing, just different moods, opinions, and attitudes on how everybody uses this stuff. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Again, I think the first one we're going to have is with a guest will be February 11th. So mark your calendar or don't, whichever you prefer. And with that, let's go ahead and get into today's masterclass. All right, so let me just get back over to Audition here. So as always, I briefly just recorded a couple of quick little voice things here, and I pulled some background vocals for some of the other examples. But we're going to start with just a basic voiceover here. And this is kind of good to showcase or to illustrate reverb-based effects. Now, one of the things that I did here to showcase these different effects, we've talked about this a lot, is that rather than applying effects at the track level, okay, so we have our track effects here. Instead, what I've done, and this is a typical workflow if you were doing actually a proper mix, whether it's for a movie, for a film, for a commercial, for just music. typically when you apply things like delay-based effects, and that includes all of the aforementioned. So reverb is a delay-based effect. Echo, flange, phase, chorus, these are all delay-based effects. If you go into a room with audio nerds and you're like, well, you wouldn't say delay-based effects, but if someone was asking about something like that, you could say, oh, did you mean like a flange or like a two-voice chorus? They're going to say, you know something. Maybe not a lot, but you know something. So these are all delay-based effects. So typically, in particular with reverb, you're usually going to place those effects on a bus. And if you take a look here, we'll just go into the mixer. It's a little easier to illustrate. I've created 3 stereo buses where I have reverb applied on the reverb bus, delay, analog delay because it does some different things, and then the echo effect on this one over here, and then phase, flange, and chorus on this one over here. And the benefit of using these effects on a bus, one, is that you can send multiple tracks, multiple sources to them simultaneously, all right? So, you know, in particular, in a music mix, again, whether for a video or for just music, you know, if you're trying to unify the sound of someone speaking, and this is great with like, I just did this actually, I was helping someone mix a 5.1 soundtrack for a video, and they were trying to sort of basically put the actors back in an ambient environment. It was all dialogue replacement, so everything was just too dry. Well, I said, okay, the best way to do that is to put them into like an ambient room, and then use the same room for all the actors and just pan them accordingly to where they are on screen. But you want to use the same one. Now, I could use 10 reverbs, 10 ambient reverbs for the 10 actors, or we can use one reverb and send all 10 of those to the bus and then pan and adjust accordingly. Less CPU usage, much more efficient, and that's typically how you would do something like that. It's not a rule. You can do it however you want. If you want to add an effect for every track and do it 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, you know, as long as your system can handle it, that's your choice. But this is kind of a typical workflow, particularly with reverb and, again, other delay-based effects, to place them on a bus and then to send a signal, either pre-fader or post-fader. We'll talk a little bit about that today, from the native track. Okay, so we're going to start with some reverb, and this is just a little voice over here. Now we're going to come back to this. You'll be very sick of these examples by the time we're done. This first one here is super short, 4 seconds, and it's just me saying something about, like, you know, check out Adobe Live Masterclasses each week. All right, so just here it is, dry as it is. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, I'm gonna put some headphones on so I can hear. Oh, also, bear with me for a second here because I realize I'm gonna be doing some stereo things. I need to turn off my my noise reduction on the stream here. Let's remove that. Okay. And as always, I hope that doesn't muck about with any sync. That's the word I was looking for. Okay. So we're going to start with this voiceover. Let's investigate reverb. Okay. Now, again, this is a super short, this is the kind of thing you'd hear, again, like in a, you know, a little teaser in between videos. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. Now, if I wanted to simply place that into an ambient space, I would do this using some type of ambient room reverb. Again, I'm trying to simulate just the natural sound of a room, a little bit reflective, maybe it's warm, but not big, not echoey, not hello, not Grand Canyon style. Just something that places me kind of in a familiar environment. So if you look at the reverb bus here, I'm using the Studio Reverb. I come to this one all the time. It is my favorite of our native reverbs. And by the way, we're working with all native effects today. I'm not going to show you third-party plugins, for the most part anyway. We have 5 different reverbs here. This one sounds good. It's not ideal for processing these days. This is old. It was never really updated. This one, I'm just going to say no on that one. This one, not too different from that one. Studio Reverb kind of sounds very different from those 3. And Surround Reverb, obviously, you're really reaping the benefit there only if you're working in a 5.1 surround session. So we're not going to do Surround Reverb today. We're going to focus on this one. And don't get me wrong. All of these four are good, and they all have their own discrete sounds and distinct sounds. So as we talked about last week with different types of compressors and emulating different analog models and things, just try them. If you're looking for something that doesn't sound like some of the other reverbs you have, whether it be a plug-in or not, just try them out. My preference, I'm just not a fan of those other three. Full reverb, yes, but it's not, that one is wonderful sounding, but it's not, in fact, I think it even tells you, let me switch it out here. Does it go red? Yeah, it does. I mean, this is, it's been doing this forever. It's a CPU intensive effect. Okay, well, that's gonna immediately make me not want to use it in real time. But what the nice thing about this one is that you just see you have a lot of control. And if you are in fact trying to model a space, right, or recreate an actual room, the benefit of full reverb is you can see here, you can actually dial in dimensions, right? And then it'll tell you what the actual room dimensions are based on your setting, right? And then it says set the reverb based on the room size. Now this is very complex. It's a lot, if you know the dimensions, it can be a bit easier, obviously. You then have some coloration settings. So again, all rooms will have an equalization characteristic. What do I mean by that? Well, just as I said before, you've got bright, you've got dark, you've got warm, you've got reflective, echoey. These are all terms to describe a room. But in terms of the room sound, warm, bright, dark, dull, right? A bathroom would be considered bright, right? Bright and kind of reflective. A kitchen, also probably kind of, maybe not bright, very reflective and echoey, maybe a little darker, right? If maybe you have a slightly higher ceiling. A bedroom with carpet, it's going to be a little more dull. It's going to be a little warmer. You can use EQ after you've done room dimensions to then dial in and really finesse the final sound. Okay, so I'm pulling this one up to show you that there's just really cool options in here. I just don't tend to use this one because it's just not ideal for real time or as ideal, but it actually sounds great. Okay. So we're going to go into Studio Reverb here, and let's just start with a preset, all right? And we're going to go into Room Ambience, all right? Actually, we'll do Room Ambience too. I think that one is a slightly larger room. It is. All right, so if we just take a look at the characteristics here, again, a smaller room size, a 1600 millisecond decay. So the total duration, the length of the reverb tail, maximum, is approximately 1.6 seconds. Now that doesn't mean I say hi, and then for the next second and a half you hear that decay, because the decay is also affected by high frequency cutoff, any diffusion or damping, and then the balance of how much dry and wet signal you have, all right? The point is it's a small environment, and as we adjust the decay here, we can make that environment effectively larger or smaller, and then use these other settings to colorize the environment, all right? So let me go ahead and, this is so short, but I'm just going to loop this around so we can kind of hear this back to back. And we're just going to start adjusting the settings here, okay? Now the first thing we're going to do, since we're using this on a send, is we're going to enable send 1. So let's go ahead and turn this on, all right? At present, you can see we're using this post fader. All right, and we'll come back to this. We'll come back to some pre-fader in a moment. Sometimes you want pre-fader, sometimes you don't. All right, and then we simply need to tell it which bus, which send are we going to use. And you have 16 available to you, by the way. Well, I'm going to go to the reverb one. So let's go ahead and choose that. Okay, by the way, how do you access those other 16 or 15 sends? This little slider right here. So a lot of people are never even aware that, oh yeah, you've got 16 sends per track or per channel. So this is how you access all of those. And they can all have independent settings, right? Okay. And then we just need to set the level. How much of that native signal are we sending to the reverb? And in this case, let's just put it to 0, right, which is the center. That's our nominal setting. Remember, we're working sort of, it'll be to the left, or I'm going the opposite way. One direction, negative amplitude, other direction, positive amplitude. Center is 0 in terms of this send level. And then we have an individual pan here. So we can also control the pan of the signal that's being sent to the reverb, but we also have the other pan of the original unprocessed signal, And we have independent control of both of those based on whether we do pre-fader or post-fader send, okay? All right. Over here in the reverb, this is where we have to decide, okay, do we want a completely wet signal or do we want some of the dry signal coming through this reverb? Well, because I have this post-fader, all right, again, I've talked about this so much, I don't want to waste a lot of time here. If you're doing post-fader, you probably want a little bit of that dry signal coming through, or maybe a lot. It depends. It depends on the sound you're going for. So I'm going to set this, it's set default to 70. Let's set this to 80%. And I'm going to currently set the wet signal to 0. And then what we're going to do is, as we're playing back here, I'm going to start to increase this just to kind of so you can hear how we start to add more of that room back into the sound. All right, here we go. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. So you can hear there's just a little bit of a tail. It's a little bright. Kind of sounds like I'm in kind of a lecture room, really, right? And again, part of that is this decay setting here, right? This is 1600 milliseconds. Now, room ambience 1 was 1000 milliseconds. So let's hear what that same thing sounds like with these same settings here, all right? Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. That's lovely. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. You can see a little less of that reverb tail. It somehow makes the voice sound a little bit more up front, but there's just a nice little bit of ambience behind it. If you're trying to take the edge off of dialogue replacement, or excuse me, replaced dialogue, placing it in an ambient space, and again, it's not an absolute. Maybe you want the 1600 or 14 or 1275. Again, you can adjust the room size. Here, the room is intentionally small. But then you have things like damping and diffusion. So it's still a bit bright. This is a fairly bright sounding voiceover. So if I want to control even a little bit more of the brightness there to kind of damp down the reflectivity of this ambient room, that's what damping is going to do. So if I put this up to like 100, let's take a listen. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Now listen again. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? So for my ear, that sounds better because the voice is already bright. I'm basically damping whatever reflections and echo are in the room. I'm damping them to make them just a little warmer. If I take this off and bring it all the way down to 0, catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Now you really got to be using your listening ears to hear the differences there. It's a bit subtle because 1, this is short, and 2, because we're already in a fairly small ambient environment. And we're already cutting off frequencies above 6,500 hertz. Now, if you've been paying attention, right, Masterclass here, nerd time, we're cutting off everything just within that range of sibilance, right? So we're going to make sure, like when I say, you know, catch new episodes each week, right? These are all potential sibilant things. So if we wanted to even take a little bit more of that high-end edge off, I could back this off to say, let's just say like around 5,000, okay? And remember, again, it's kind of the fundamentals of sibilance, 5,600, 6,300 hertz, but it can go lower, right? It can go into the 5,000 hertz range. It can be, you know, still as high as 7K. If we back off a little bit more though, catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses, right? It's just a little bit warmer. It just sounds right. Oh, and by the way, let's hear what it sounds like with nothing now, because you've been hearing all the reverberated sound. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Now let's turn it back on. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. And again, we also have early reflections. The early reflections are also giving us some of those bright reflections that create this 1000 millisecond decay. So if we back those off, we can kind of soften and take some of that edge off even more. If you're sitting here listening and going, God, there's so many settings, they all seem to do the same thing. What? Yes, there are many. and it takes a long time to really play and get the sound you want. But that's what makes this effect great, is that there's so much flexibility, right? Now you might say, well, what's a good starting point? Well, the preset, right? Preset's a good starting point. Here's the thing. Once you dial in your setting, so let's say this is my Adobe Live ambient sound. Whenever I do a voiceover, I want to stick this effect on there. Best thing to do, save it as a preset, right? So we're going to do just that. We'll call this Room Ambience 3 Adobe Live. Now I have officially made a preset that I can recall and use again, okay? Pretty cool. All right, so that's ambient reverb, right? A little bit reflective, a little bit bright. Now, taking that same thing, sometimes we're using reverb for effect, right? For dramatic effect. Maybe we want, this whole thing to sound like I'm in a huge, great hall. You saw that was the preset I just chose there, all right? Now, if I'm going to do something like that, where I want a little bit more control over the reverb itself, how much of that reverberated signal is happening, that's where I'm going to be tempted to use or change this post-fader to pre-fader. So what this means when it's in pre-fader mode, again, talked about this a lot, is that we're sending this voiceover to the reverb before the fader, which means that you will always have control over the dry original signal with the fader and then the reverberated signal here. They are completely independent when you use pre-fader. Now this is particularly useful if you're trying to create sort of, again, visual sound effects like, hello! You want to like tail off the reverb and sort of control how it flows in and out of the mix. You want to do that pre-fader. Here's what I mean. So we're going to change a couple settings in the studio reverb as well. Now I chose the Great Hall preset here. You get a lot of explanation on how to use reverbs. If you're doing pre-fader, which means you're always going to have the dry original signal controllable via its original track fader, you do not want any dry signal in the reverb output. Does that make sense? Because then you're doubling the dry signal. I don't want that. I just want the wet signal. So this entire bus is just going to be, it's just going to be wet hall. It's just going to be reverberated signal. If I want more of the dry, direct voice, I'm going to use the track 1 fader for that. If I want more echo, I'm going to use this fader, okay? That's it. Now let's check out what this preset sounds like. Now, again, take a look at some of the characteristics here. We're talking about a great hall, a big venue, a concert hall, Microsoft Theater, LA, 7,500 seats or whatever, 6,500 seats. So we've got a larger room size. We've got about a 6,000 millisecond, so 6-second decay. Not so much early reflection. That's because halls tend to not have a lot of early reflection. They tend to be not super like bright and reflective. It's the decay, the reverb tail that kind of gives it its warmth and tends to make like classical concert halls so ideal. You've got a lot of wood paneling and things for acoustic transmission, right? So don't necessarily have a lot of early reflections. These can kind of muck up clarity, right? Width, we want to maintain a very wide stereo image for this particular hall. Note the high frequency cut. We're cutting everything off on the reverberated signal above 4,000 hertz. So if there's any sibilance happening, you're not going to hear resonating at 6,500 hertz in your ear. That's not going to happen, not on the reverberated signal, because we're cutting it out entirely, all right? We're also rolling off everything below 300, so you're not going to have any rumbly reverb. This is another point worth making. I've made it many times. I feel like I've made it too many times. People watching are like, you've said that already. I have the right to repeat. Low frequency cut is extremely important because you do not want to reverberate low. You don't want to low sounds. What? You don't want to reverberate bass frequencies in general. Now, again, if you're doing sound design for a horror film, and you've got some, there's a rumble going on, and you're trying to simulate that feeling of just chaos and whatever. Different story. Sound design breaks all rules are thrown out the window, so to speak, when it comes to sound design, because you're trying to create emotion with sound, or you're trying to use sound to articulate a visual emotion. So you can do whatever you want. But in terms of like a voiceover, or hey, I'm going to add a little bit of reverb to this bass guitar, you do not want to add reverb to a bass guitar and have like no bass roll off, because then you're just going to have echoing very, very loudly and muddying up all of the low end frequency. This is probably the most common mistake that people make when they just randomly apply reverb to things, is that a lot of these reverbs may not have the low frequency rolled off by default. So you're wondering, why is all the bass so echoey? Well, that's why, all right? So we've got it all set. Let's take a listen to what this sounds like. And in the spirit of using pre-fader, right? So remember now, we always have control over the dry signal. If I pull the reverb slider down and I just play this back, we should just hear the voiceover as it is, correct? Right? Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. But the signal is still going to that reverb bus. So now when I play back, I'm going to raise the fader here, and you'll see we're now controlling the independent reverb of that signal. Here we go. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? It's all here. Now, if we want it to play the whole time, just slightly in the background, again, we can adjust the level there, wind it back, hit play. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right? Or we don't like that, that's too much, take it down even more, again, play it back. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? That's how you do that. Reverb effects. And I really recommend, if you kind of want to understand how to design and how to work through different types of reverbs, again, we have plates. What are the differences between something like a plate and a hall? It's going to be around the brightness. Again, we talked about this on stream before. Halls are notoriously dark and warm. Plates are notoriously sort of, well, not notoriously. Plates are in general brighter and more shimmery because it's literally an electrified metal rectangle that is vibrating based on electrified signal being sent to it. It's metal. Metal is ping, plong, ping, right? It's plinky, it's bright. Plates are bright. Spring reverb, right? Think old guitar amps. Also, kind of on the brighter side. They also have the distinction of having that kind of thing if you hit it. Just, if you hit the amp, you'll hear that because it's a spring. Springing. What do springs do? What is that? Right, that's what these guitar amp verbs, I actually made these presets 22 years ago. These are from impulses that were sampled from, I think it was a Fender Dual Twin. They're not exact. We had to tweak a little bit, I think, to make them work in this reverb, but that's what they're trying to simulate, okay? So it's a great idea to try some of these, again, like what, a swirly reverb? Okay, what does that sound like? I'm curious. Tell me, what does a swirly reverb sound like? Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, well, that's a little hard to hear because the balance was wrong. So again, let's go to 100% wet. Check it out again. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, I don't know, I don't hear the swirl myself, but you can start to look at this and go, okay, well, one thing I noticed, it was super bright. Because there's like no high frequency cut. Cutting everything above 14K, you might as well not cut anything, all right? And if you're over 70, you're not hearing it anyway. So, that's not a slam on 70-year-old people. That's just the human body, unfortunately, breaking down. Okay, they're rolling off a lot of bass, too. So, again, just got a lot of less bright and mid-rangey reverb happening here, okay? So you just start to kind of learn and understand how these things work. All right. So that, my friends, is reverb. Any reverb questions? Evangelist Wizard Spring Reverb Impersonator. Tim, sometimes you really nail it, man. That one's good. I'm screenshotting that. That's hilarious. I'm literally screenshotting it. I just did. Okay. Okay, Tim's asking, okay, remove bass and then add reverb first and roll off the bass after that. So, right, so that's a good question. Again, order of operations. So, if you're let's just use, for sound design, you ultimately have, some kind of LFE, low frequency effects, which could be sound effects, sound design, ominous, 2-octave below synth pads just going, which just by design of their nature in the scale will have lower bass frequencies. I'd say tweak those first, and then if you want some of that reverberated bass, do that after. Do that after you're adding the reverb. Don't necessarily add it beforehand. You're already equalizing that direct signal, that original signal first, just in the context of a clean mix. That's actually a great question, Tim, because that's the thing is you ultimately want to get things sounding good dry before you begin processing, if that makes sense. If you try and tweak after the fact, it can just, you start to lose perspective. That's really it. So I will typically go through, and whatever tweaks are needed equalization wise, and I'll often do them, you can see just right here, like on that voiceover, I pulled out a bit of, again, right in that sibilant range because of my off-axis nature of how I recorded this. It's just coming out a little harsh. So I already know with this mic, about 5,800 hertz, pull it down about 4 dB, and it kind of takes away that harshness. So I'll do a little EQ, but again, and I could have probably, actually that's coming technically after the verb, but I would have typically done that as an insert, an effects insert. And it just depends on the nature of what you're doing. For low frequency effects especially, you want to tweak those and get those sounding good dry before you begin adding additional stuff on top. Okay, now of course we could send things to multiple sends. We can do that towards the end. I'm going to turn off send 1 for reverb. It's still going there, we're just not going to hear it now. And let's go to send 2, turn this on, put it at 0. And now let's go to delays, all right? And we're going to start with just one of the most common things using the standard delay effect. Now, again, if we go into delay and echo, we have 3. I'll be showcasing the 3 here, starting with traditional delay. And I pulled this one up because this is actually directly related to what this person was asking me, is how do I create this kind of very wide, broad sound of my voice in like sort of stereo, but with a mono signal. And I've shown you on stream before. Now, if you want to do it kind of old school, one way to do that is just to duplicate this track, place it on another track, pan each left and right, and then slide them apart by about 50-55 milliseconds. And it's going to create this very wide sound. Now, it's the same signal, right? If you really want to get us an extremely wide and slightly variable sound, I'd say just double it, say it twice. But you could also just do this natively with the effect. Here's what I'm talking about. So, and that's why it works for this particular voiceover example. Here's our dry signal. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. Oh, what's that? Holy, Diane Wilson. Oh, very nice. Thanks, Diane. Kevin Monahan. I love delay. Very good. Beware the Thunder Drums preset. Yeah, there are a lot of those in there. Be careful, because remember, it's just like with setting thresholds. Your level is arbitrary. There's no way to say, oh, it's always going to be -6 or -18 or 0. So yeah, some of them may be very intense. Always be careful with those wet-dry balances in particular. All right, so our dry signal, mono. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses, right? Now let's say we want the original, the first part of the original. We want the first half of this to be, catch live, and then we want, on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Adobe Live Masterclasses. We want it to turn on right there. All right. If I just turn on the effect now, again, we're sending everything over there. All right. And if we just play this back, let's play the whole thing. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right. That's that very common, since the 70s, early 80s, and well into the 90s, imaging effect. Now, typically, it starts out dry, and then when they get to whatever it's usually a station ID, you're listening to sound effect. I always use KSLX, which is our local classic rock station here in Phoenix. So typically it'll be, keep listening to mono, dry, KSL, X, stereo. To do that here, we're going to use a little automation. So we're going to get a little bit complex here. Over in our automation lane, we're going to twirl this down, okay? And you see you've got some options here to show envelopes. What are we showing envelopes for? Well, I want the envelope for the rack, for the send 1 output, send 2 output power. Because essentially I want to turn the effect on, but only in the second half of this voiceover. So we can automate when that effect kicks in with any effect that we apply here, all right? So I'm going to automate the power of that. And when I do that, you'll see that we've got this nice little purple line here, okay? Now, at the top of it, the top means it's on. So we actually want it off. We want to reverse this. So I'm going to take this little doohickey right there. Let's create another keyframe. By the way, I'm just clicking. And let's just drag it down, okay? So what this is now doing, if we take a look, if you're following along diligently, remember this is the power. So the power is off. We can see that here with our little tooltip. Is it showing me off? Tooltip? Off. There you go. And then it's going to turn on right here. All right? So let's listen to that. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? It's not rocket science, not my most brilliant image model there either. That should also be cut out, that little section. A little too much time going on there. But you get the idea. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? Now, again, if you want it tighter, not quite as echoey, maybe slightly more phasey, chorusy, if we drop these, I'm going to do the right delay. Let's do this around 55, and this one around 43-ish. This is now going to sound slightly more chorusy. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. All right? Super fast slap back. Again, as you decrease the time, all right, and I always use slightly more on one side. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Now we're not quite getting that stereo slap because, again, it's just super, super short. Opposite of that, of course, if you want to double up on those times and make it slightly more echoey. By the way, these are single echoes. We'll get to repeat echoes that, as Kevin was describing before. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay? On Adobe Live Masterclasses. So we're delaying the left side by 50 milliseconds, the right side by twice that, which is why you're getting that longer delay on the right side, okay? Great opportunity here to mess about with presets, okay? Dueling drunk drummers. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Now, you might be wondering, why am I hearing delay before I get there? Each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. That's because we do something a little sneaky here. We allow you to use negative delay time, which effectively acts like a pre-delay, which some of your reverbs will have too. This is great because you can effectively implement a delayed signal of what's coming before it happens. So this is great for sound design. A lot of cool things. This is so simple. It's such a simple effect, but there's actually a lot of control here. Now you might ask, how come we're not using 100% wet? You can. The delays can get very, very intense. So this is really an area where you want to be very careful about the balances of that wet and dry. You saw before when I was doing my little example, I had them set the same to 75%. So the echoes were the same amplitude, all right? Again, you can offset them to create slightly different stereotype effects. But at its basic level, this effect just does, fun, cool stuff. And if you're doing, like, again, imaging type things, and you just need a single delay, a single slap, that's what that one's for. Now, if you're looking to do multiple tape style subsequent echoed delays, I recommend using the analog delay effect. Now, the analog delay effect has 3 modes. It has tape mode, tube-based tape machine mode, and then analog. Analog is the best sounding one. There's no other way to put it, actually. Try out the other 2. This is the best sounding one. Analog sounds analog. If you've ever listened to an analog delay, if you've ever listened to an analog tape delay, I guess there's digital tape, sure. This one, I love it. I use this effect all the time because it really sounds very analog. Now, there are third-party, plugins that have tape delays that are actual emulations from tape machines, like an Echoplex or a Roland Studio Echo, or any other number of old-school analog non-tape-based solid-state delays. And they'll do things like they'll have, you can add in tape hiss or noise or DC offset or something like that. This isn't doing that. What this does have, though, is it has feedback. So this is the number of delays. So remember, the delay effect is just one. It's one delay. Hi, hi. Hey, hey. Hello, hello. Feedback now lets you add infinite delays, and as it feeds back, based on the trash setting, trash is, again, emulating in the analog domain and in the tape domain, with each subsequent echo, it loses fidelity. So it gets progressively darker and also slightly less intelligible. The trash setting. These two things make this super, super cool when kind of devising or trying to do stuff with sound design, all right? So in the case of this, let's start with just like a 330 millisecond delay. All right, you can see that where it's coming on, and let's just start with maybe, like 30% feedback and 20% trash. We haven't changed too much. Let's take a listen. Catch new episodes each week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, so at 330 milliseconds, that's the tempo of that. If we wanted to make those longer, slower, on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, now you're hearing a decent amount of those echoes. If we want more of them, we can increase the wet signal. But remember, this is actually creating a feedback loop. So the hotter your wet signal, gotta be careful, you could in fact create this continuous feedback loop that just ends up in total distortion. Sometimes great for sound design, but you gotta be mindful. And if you're wondering, why is it doing that? Wet out feedback on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay, now if we increase the feedback, let's go to like 100%. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Okay. Now we're only trashing it by 20%. Let's increase the trash setting here to around 50. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Right? And let's do these a little bit faster now, but increasing the feedback. Let's put that wet signal out. Just balance it down. It's getting a little loud here. Let's take a listen to this. Week on Adobe Live Masterclasses. Right? That's that effect. I used to use that for effect a lot when I would do like audio transitions and things. By the way, if I were going to use this, I would use it like right at the end, right? Live Masterclass. 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 So I'm just going to move where this turns on. Adobe Live Masterclass. Okay. So this is multiple repeats, right? Hello, hello. Now, by the way, if we take the trash all the way down, let's go back to a sort of maybe an 85% here. Adobe Live Masterclasses. It'll kind of dissipate into silence eventually. So it's always a balancing act. Wet, feedback, and trash. But that's how you can create some really, really cool sound design effects just with this one thing. And that distortion that's happening, as someone who used to do this and still does via his Studer Revox A77 tape delay, it's pretty darn authentic. It sounds very, very real, and it sounds great. All right, the last one in terms of delay, proper delay, named delay that we're going to showcase here is the echo effect. Now this one, again, we're just going to kind of touch upon some of the presets here. We don't need to go through all the settings. I think you get the idea around delay. The main difference here is that this will also offer multiple delays, but it also offers what's known as sort of ping-ponging or echo bouncing, right? So you can have the left and right, hello, 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 doing the same thing. That would be locking the left and right. Or if you have them bounce, hello, 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 kind of between the ears, all right? So if we go to something, let's just see, what have we got in here? So here's like an analog. I wonder if the analog one has it. Let's see what that sounds like. Curious. On Adobe Live Masterclass. Okay. Oh, and of course it has the channels doing the exact same thing. So this is the analog delay. It's just mono because they're delaying at the exact same time. So yeah, you're not going to hear any kind of stereo pinging. Let's see. Sci-fi cliche approaching. I'm in. All right, let's maybe put this echo level down because these could be super loud. Feedback is pretty high. It's got me a little nervous. Maybe bounce this. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, and this is, look at this. It's 2,000 milliseconds on the left and 200 on the right. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. On Adobe Live Masterclasses. So you can hear it's doing different things, kind of pinging them between the channels. Similarly here, now here's the difference. You know, you don't have your trash setting because you have successive echo equalization, i.e. trash. So for each echo, what do you want to do to those echoes? Well, I want to roll off everything above 7K and let's preserve everything else, but continually roll off bass as well, right? So we could do something like that. Let's shrink this up. Let's make this, say 500. On Adobe Live Masterclass. So do you hear the echoes now they're mid-rangey. There's no bass, there's no high end, and they're getting progressively kind of more mid-rangey and dirty. Successive echo equalization, all right? I don't use this one too often, but for sound design, it can create some was there one in here called Creepy Spooky? What does this sound like? Is this the one I used before? On Adobe Live Masterclasses. Yeah, that's nothing fancy, but you can do some cool effects with this. Okay. All right, let's see what we got here. Infinite tape loops could put a hole in the space-time continuum. True. In the 80s in college radio, we used to use the board and reel-to-reel recorders to get our feedback delays going and made literal tape loops. Yep, I mean, right there with you, man. Constantly. Very, very good. All right. Ooh, I just spat all over my keyboard. Good job. Okay. Dueling Drunk Drummers needs a better preset name. Probably would have never used it because of that name. Yeah, I know, right? I've never used Cardboard Kick Drum for that reason. Okay. All right. We got 7 minutes here. I'm always like at the 7-minute mark here. All right. So those are delays. So once again, let's turn off Send To. And now let's get into phase, flange, and chorus. All right. Am I forgetting anything? Yeah, there was some here that I didn't really get to. Okay. Let's do these background vocals. Let's go to some vocals here. All right, so these are from, you've heard these before. These are some of the high background vocals from Fear the Q-Tip. Okay, all right. And we want to place these in a kind of phased environment, all right? What does a phaser sound like? Let's go ahead and enable this. And let's go to the phase, flange, chorus, all right, and start with the phaser here. Now, for this, I'm going to recommend doing this post-fader. The reason for that is that this is going to allow me with these background vocals, once I send the amount of level that I want to this single fader is going to control the dry background vocal signal and the phaser all together. I still have the level of the phase signal here, but with something like this, I would probably do this together. Now, you can still do it pre-fader, so you always have the dry and then the phased ones. And in fact, yeah, let's just do that. It's just easier to control on stream. You just want to play around. Sometimes with background vocals, especially if you're trying to go for like an intense, very kind of glued together kind of vibe, I will typically use post-fader. But let's just do pre-fader for the sake of today. And we're going to start with a preset in here called Phase 80, which is emulating the old school Phase 90 MXR pedal. We'll see how good it does. I think I like this one. Let's take a listen. I don't love it. What's this Jace 1, 2, 3, 4? Nope, not like that either. Let's try Shimmer Phase. See what we like. That one I kind of liked. And you can hear that the modulation, there's the modulation of that phase cycle. It's super slow, or I should say super low frequency, how it's kind of sweeping through. And it actually really works with this, right? You can, of course, adjust that modulation rate as we go. All right, so a slow mod really works for this. And similarly, the phase differential here. All right. So again, you can kind of create these very spacey, kind of 60s sounding effects. This is something where I might use in conjunction a little bit of phase and a little bit of reverb. And this is where the benefit of doing pre-fader makes sense, because what that now means, let's come in here. And if I were to also say, go to send to, turn this on, pre-fader, reverb. We've still got reverb going here. Let's play this back. I'm going to keep the phase on, but I'm going to start to bring in some reverb. That's pre-fader. Here we go. All right. And I might even want the Great Hall for this, not the swirly one. So we get something like this. Ugh, running out of time. Right? And you see there I was balancing the phase against the reverb. Really nice to have that flexibility, all right? Similarly with flange, or dissimilarly, flanging literally comes from, the Beatles. John Lennon is actually credited with coming up with this, and George Martin. The reel, the take-up reel on a tape machine is the plastic thing that's holding the tape, is known as the edge is known as the flange. And they would literally kind of put their finger on it to sort of slow down the speed ever so slightly. And that's the effect that it created, which is now known as the flanger effect. Again, lots of options here for presets. Let's take a quick listen. This one I love. Again, similar settings to the phaser as well. You see modulation rate, stereo phasing, feedback. Okay, so you can use that modulation rate to create faster styled echoes. You can invert. Lots of cool things here. Adjust that final delay time a little bit. I love that. All right, maybe add a little bit more reverb back in there now, and then balance these out to see what they sound like. Okay, really nice, very dramatic, perfect for background vocals. And then also we have the chorus effect in here. So if we take a listen to the chorus effect, this again typically is usually two to four. We let you go up to 16 different voices. Lots of presets in here. This is just the default setting. So let's hear what this one sounds like with 2 voices. Kind of getting this weird thing, and I see that fairly high modulation right there. I don't love that. Let's try an acoustic duet. Yeah, 10 milliseconds. This sounds about right. Super slow. You can see the lower your delay rate here, again, that phase pattern is going to be significantly slower. It's going to work nicely with vocals. Slow modulation rate as well. And the more voices you add, the bigger it's going to get, the bigger it's going to sound. Add a little bit more of that reverb back in there, and now you've really got something that's going to sound pretty cool. And you've got some backwards as well. But my friends, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. We've got the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge coming up next. Stick around for that. Until next time, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.